break off for the lunch by the member for St. John's. Mr. Speaker, this is indeed a very proud moment for me, but more importantly, it is a proud moment for our tri-island state of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. Many discussions, many concerns have been raised around this issue of non-biodegradable substances, like plastics, like what we call styrofoam. The member for St. John's gave a scientific name for it, polystyrene. And, you know, people have been concerned about it for our health, for the sanitation of our community and our country. And we in the tourism sector and all persons who are interested in that industry, we have also been concerned about our image in country and internationally, because as the member for St. John said before, we promote ourselves as pure Grenada, Isle of Spice. And we market heavily on the pure Grenada. As a matter of fact, I am beginning to think of our country as pure Grenada, not Grenada. Because when we speak about Grenada to visitors or we speak to people abroad, we always, generally in the hotel industry, in the tourism industry, we say pure Grenada. And the thing is, people like this concept. But before I go into the concept, Mr. Speaker, I want to recognize that a number of persons played a key role. I alluded to some of them before we recessed for lunch, those directly involved in the hotel industry. But even persons who were not directly involved would raise the discussion time and time again. And certainly within our cabinet, we have had some champions that would not let this topic die. And for the efforts of all of the stakeholders, I know the Minister for Health, the member for the South, has been very instrumental. The minister and ministers in the Ministry of Environment, etc., they have been pushing. I know our Prime Minister has been extremely supportive, and all cabinet members as a whole. And if we just look at what is happening here, this is pretty much our first sitting where we start presenting bills. And this is the bill that we pushed. Of all the other bills, except for the supplementary, they are amendments. This is the bill that we have major concerns about and that we want to push. So it just demonstrates the interest of our cabinet and our government and our country as a whole in this topic. So we are happy that this matter is being presented here. And Mr. Speaker, I know it would not be implemented tomorrow. There are dates that has been set by the minister responsible for this particular issue, and I will leave that to them to discuss. But we have taken a giant leap, and that is so important. Mr. Speaker, in preparing for this presentation, and I'm not going to be very long, but I had to do a little bit of research, because when we take important decisions like that seek to change people's way of life, the way people's habits, we do not take it lightly. And we had to know for sure that what we were doing was the right thing. And when I looked and when I listened to the member for St. John's speaking about some of the dangerous chemicals that you could find in some of the materials that we're seeking to ban, and when I look for myself at some of the different materials, not just plastics and styrofoam, but a number of things that are non-biodegradable, that I hope in another amendment, more things will be added at some point in time. But we're taking our time, recognizing that it's many years ago that we started with the plastics and the styrofoam. But when I watch How many years? While some of them do degrade, but the amount of years Grenada would be inundated and covered. For example, they're talking about monofilament fishing line, 600 years it takes for this thing to degrade. Aluminum cans, I guess that's what you have the beers and other drinks in, 80 to 200 years. And a long list of things, and we could research it ourselves, but it's a lot of years. Plastics, plastic bags, an average of 20 years. And when we look at what perseverance looked like in 20 years, where would we be? How would we be? How would we be looking? So the amount of years is of serious importance to us. So even if the scientists might tell us, well, it will degrade in a certain period of time, the periods would not be in our lifetime, nor our great-great-great-grandchildren's lifetime. So it is very important what we're doing here to make that difference for the future of our country, for the security and the safety of our children and our children's children. Mr. Speaker, I have here, and I don't want to forget at all, this is plastic too. This says Chocolate Fest Grenada 2018. And this was used in the Chocolate Fest, a very well-attended Chocolate Fest that brought revenues to Grenada and also assisted in bringing Grenada even further on the international scene. These are the cups they use. They are reusable. They are reusable, and so sometimes if something may not biodegrade in a short time, but you can use it for a long while. So since maybe 2-3 months now, I have it in my house and I use it. I have this one, which is the Pure Grenada Music Festival. When you got in there and you paid for a drink, they gave it to you. You paid for this, and you held it and you replenished this same glass over and over and over again. And, you know, I want to compliment these people for taking some steps where it's difficult not to use plastic, to use reusable plastic. I want to mention that because sometimes we might have to make compromises along the way, and maybe in the regulations that the ministry or the minister will bring, they might have to talk about that. But people are so conscious nowadays about the environment that they have pushed us to look at this more seriously. Mr. Speaker, one of the issues was the cost of the biodegradable boxes and cups and whatever things we use. We have biodegradable plastics. And they were saying, I know in speaking to people about it, but it's going to cost more. But when I ask, how much more does it cost? I have never been told. So sometimes the discussion on something new and something different frightens us. It's going to cost us more. It's going to be too troublesome and whatever. And sometimes when we investigate, it may not be that much. But what if it was a bit more costly? Cost is not just what you take from your pocket and pay in dollars and cents. When you look at the bigger picture, cost is what it costs us to lose our environment so that what the clean air and the spaces that we enjoy now would no longer be there for our children and for generations to come. That is real cost, Mr. Speaker. So I know people may be a little bit concerned, but what I find encouraging is that a number of entities on their own have started to use. So I spoke about Mr. Fielding and True Blueberry Resort. All the things that they use are biodegradable, down to the drinking straws. They are biodegradable. So many of the other restaurants have started without us even imposing the law, because when people care about the country, they do not wait on a legislation to do the right thing. And I want to compliment all of the people who have pushed us, but those who have put their monies and the efforts where their mouths were and started to do it. And we will find that it will not be so difficult to implement this, because a number of business places have started on their own to implement that. They're wondering how you could get straws that are biodegradable and so on. And it's happening. There is a small business called Sun Hunters. The tourists like them a lot. And they like St. Mark's too. So they've come to St. Mark's to start up a project. And one of the first things, and so they're taking them into the hills and the valleys, and it's an ecotourism thing. And one of the first things we discussed, what are you going to feed them? What are you going to feed them in? And these people have done their research, and they come with everything that is biodegradable, and they're using it. So it may not be so difficult as maybe some of us think to get these changes to happen, because the changes are happening and have happened even as we speak. And I want to compliment Team Grenada, because whether it's tourism or anything else that Grenada does well, it is not one entity, it's not one person, it's not just government passing legislation, but it's the people with their will who come forward and say, we will do what is right for Grenada. So all of the people in Grenada, Carriacou, Petit Martinique, those who are going to go to their shop, to the little countryside shops, like in Victoria or Waltham, and take their shopping bags. We used to go with our bags, and they put the things. When I was small, there wasn't plastic bag, and that's a lot of 100 years ago. But they didn't use plastic bags. You went in the shop, and your flour and your sugar was in paper bags. And we lived well, and people lived to be 80, 90, 100 years. And now we're more modernized that we have, you go without anything, and you come back with a few plastic bags. We're dying early of cancers and a lot of other things. And therefore, we have to look at quality of life. And we have to look at the cost of quality of life as we discuss this bill. So I trust that the Minister for the Environment would not have a lot of difficulties when they put the regulations together and they discuss with the importers and the distributors and whoever use it. I do not believe they would have a lot of problem. I cannot believe, because this is our future. This is the future of our country. So the Pure Grenada concept, we have to keep it, first of all, for ourselves, for every one of us who's alive now and for people to come. But the Pure Grenada concept is well liked and respected worldwide. So when people hear that you're environmentally friendly, they like to come to your country. They like to support. But if we say we're environmentally friendly and they're driving up the road, and I mean, there was one day I was coming down into St. George's, and when I passed the Green Bridge, it was raining heavily, and there was a whole barrage of styrofoam cups and boxes passing under the bridge. I remember taking up a photo and talking about, I called a radio station at the same time to speak about it, because, we just, first of all, we use the wrong things and then we dump them indiscriminately. So they go out in the ocean, and all those who love to eat fish and so on, because it's one of the better proteins to eat, even when it does break up, it goes into the fish, as was said before, so I wouldn't go much into this. But it's going to take a while to change the lifestyle, but I think common sense is going to win. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to support this bill with all my heart and soul, because I believe it's the right thing for us. Grenada is still regarded as unspoilt and untouched. Maybe a lot of the plastic bags, we don't see them so easily because they dump it behind Perseverance. But I pass Perseverance nearly every day. And those of us who live on the western side, we know how painful it is to watch what is happening there. And we know how, we're talking about cost, we know how costly it is going to be to resolve that problem. And I'm sure maybe some people have some figures already, because government is looking at dealing with it. We cannot leave Perseverance as a perpetual shame to Grenada. We have to deal with it at some point. And the more and the longer we take to implement these things to reduce the amount of waste that collects, is the more costly it is going to be for us. So instead of getting roads and schools and other things, we have to focus on waste that could have been avoided in the first instance. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to place on record my support. I want to place on record my highest appreciation for those within the cabinet and for my cabinet colleagues who have championed this cause. Every one of us has done what we could. Some people might think it took too long, But when you're looking at changing or modifying a habit, we not, even when we're 15, we do not just impose things on people, but we consult, we negotiate. And so the ministers who were directly involved, they have done just so. And I think, Mr. Speaker, we are ready to implement as of this minute. I'm sure after hearing presentations, the people who are involved with the plastics will not wait to hear the regulations, but we will go to the stores with our shopping bags that are biodegradable and continue to use them. And Mr. Speaker, as I say that, every now and then I still forget and go to the supermarket without a bag. So I understand how difficult it is to change a habit, but I know our people love Grenada, and good sense will prevail. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Representative for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this bill and to make a couple comments as well. First off, I think it is very fitting, Mr. Speaker, the first working session in this beautiful house. So many of us have said how beautiful it is, not just us here as representatives, but visitors to this house and visitors to this island, that we use the first working session to pass a significant bill that protects the beauty of our island, the pristine, pure environment that we refer to as pure Grenada, that others recognize to be pure Grenada. We were speaking about this bill for years. We delayed, but our justification, as has been said from my sister from St. Mark's, democracy sometimes is slow in making sure that all stakeholders are consulted. I am not proud of the fact that we were speaking first and that Guyana and Antigua have gone ahead of us and passed the legislation. However, I think we have the opportunity now with the passing of this legislation, with the proper consultation with all the stakeholders, that we can leapfrog and we can regain that position, the position that we want to hold as being pure Grenada, the green environment, the greenest tourism market in the Caribbean. While some who have looked at this bill and those who will look at it in the coming days and weeks may find that the time that we have given may be extensive for total compliance, I believe that is to ensure that once we begin total compliance, that there is exactly that. There is complete and total compliance. That does not mean that we cannot, as a nation, as a government, as a people, force compliance before that. That does not mean that we cannot and should be recognizing, and I would like to today, those who have been compliant even before the passage of this legislation. The True Blue Inns, the St. George's University that does not allow styrofoam on their campus, container parks, the dive shops that have not just been preventing the use of these plastic products and styrofoam products in their own environment, but the dive shops in particular I think are worthy of mention. They have been taking young Grenadians out to pick up the plastic that is in the waters of Grenada and the various areas that they see as our pristine environment, being proactive. So I think with that wave, Mr. Speaker, having set that long date, I intend to be a customer who supports industries and establishments that are compliant now, as of today, have been compliant before and have been proactive enough. And the saying goes, adapt or die. If we as a nation do not adapt and become environmentally friendly, we as a nation will die. And as such, it is reasonable to expect our consumers to have the same policy with respect to those that they purchase from, those that they frequent, at all different levels. I will not or should not be purchasing from a supplier who is not compliant. I will not or should not be purchasing from a restaurant, a bar, a supermarket, a shop who does not respect my very own environment. And it is not about the cost today. I've heard mention of that the biodegradable materials cost more. That is a narrow-minded statement, the cost of using plastics and styrofoam to our environment is far greater. Zika, chikungunya, the degree of those diseases, the impact of those diseases on our environment would have been much less had we been compliant with respect to our environment, had we not had that much styrofoam and plastic in our environment for mosquitoes to breed in. So the next step is that we need to make sure as well, Mr. Speaker, that while we force this compliance and we have set a deadline, that we also ensure with other legislation that we have passed that we're not simply replacing the type of litter that exists in our country, that we're not simply replacing the plastic and styrofoam with paper and biodegradable products. Because while the biodegradable products will not last on the environment as long as the plastic and styrofoam, they still will be damaging and be unsightly and will still create some of the nuisances and health hazards to our environment. So this has to go hand in hand, and I'm looking forward to working with my colleague Minister in Environment and our various stakeholders, solid waste as one, and litter wardens, to make sure that now that we have passed this, we use this momentum as well to address the issue of litter in general on an environment. Because the plastic, the biodegradable straw, or the biodegradable cup or the biodegradable plate will still blow onto Grenada's beach if we do not put it and collect it properly, put it in a proper receptacle. It may be a nuisance for a shorter period of time, but a nuisance it still will be. So we work hand in hand to make sure that my colleague Minister of Environment and myself as Minister of Health and the stakeholders can give our colleague sister in tourism all of the tools necessary to ensure that when we say as a people proudly that this is pure Grenada, that it truly remains pure Grenada, litter-free Grenada, biodegradable Grenada in terms of all of the products that we use. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Representative for St. George South. Honourable Representative for St. Patrick West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my support to this bill as presented by the member for St. John, and to indicate at the same time that we are on the right track with regards to preserving our environment as well as the health of our people. And I did not repeat the arguments that have been presented by members who spoke before me with regards to the merits of moving in the direction of less non-biodegradable materials and substituting more biodegradable materials. However, Mr. Speaker, I have some issues or some concerns which I would like to raise. And I'm raising them here, Mr. Speaker, because unfortunately I did not get a copy of the bill not until yesterday, and therefore it did not afford me the opportunity to seek certain clarification on some of the issues that I would like to raise here, Mr. Speaker, and therefore I have to raise them in this environment. First of all, Mr. Speaker, when I look at the definition given, definition for non-biodegradable, when you look at clause, well, under definition, and when I look at section 2, subsection 2, I cannot differentiate. What I see there is really a repetition. I believe that we ought to present a more scientific definition of what constitutes a non-biodegradable material, because the evidence is there. To say that it is what the minister prescribed, I don't think that is adequate for the ordinary man out there, not knowing exactly what we're talking about. We might be talking to the educated, yes, but for the ordinary man out there, To simply say that it is what the minister prescribes as non-biodegradable is biodegradable, I don't think that is adequate, Mr. Speaker. I think something is missing there. And we could, you do your research, and the definition of non-biodegradable is clear. And I think that should have been used to sensitize and to inform the people as to exactly what we're talking about. And that's something that the minister might just say tomorrow, let me include this, or let me not include that. I think we should have done a little better in that area. And again, Mr. Speaker, because of the significance, because of the importance of this thing, I'm wondering why those items that we classify as non-biodegradable were not included in a schedule and attached it to the bill, instead of depending on regulations by the minister. Shouldn't it be a schedule? And then the minister you could have a clause which said that to include or exclude as the minister may, right? But as it stands right now, it said that the minister may put in the gazette, may. I mean, to me, may is optional. Do we really want this thing to be optional? I don't think so. I think that's a shortcoming there. So the minister shall, if we have to be so conclusive of what we're doing. But to give you that option of may, that means you could decide not to, or you could decide to do it. And to me, that's a shortcoming that I have observed. And maybe, as I said, if we had prior discussions, that would have been clarified. As the member for St. Mark rightly said, Mr. Speaker, when we speak of non-biodegradable materials, we are not really looking only at the composition, the chemical composition of the material, but it is considered in terms of the time frame for degradation. Yeah? And as was rightly said, some items might take over 500 years to degrade. Others take, when you look at the list of, and the member was giving us, I was wondering why she didn't give us a complete list. Glass bottles, over 1 million years. Plastic beverage bottles, 450 years. Disposable diapers, 450 years. Plastic bags, 10 years, and it goes on and on. But what is significant here, Mr. Speaker, when I look at styrofoam cups, 50 years to degrade. But at the same time, when you look at plastic beverage bottles, the same one that we use to put a chubby and whatever, it is 450 years. But yet in this bill, I do not see any mention being made of the plastic bottles. A lot of emphasis on styrofoam, which has a shorter degradable time frame than the plastic bottles. So I'm wondering, is it because of economic necessity that we are not touching the plastic bottles now? Or is it because the health issue emanating from the use of styrofoam is far more imperative than the use of the plastic bottle at this point in time? So if you are talking about biodegradable in terms of the time frame, I think a lot of emphasis should be given on the plastic bottle because it's a nuisance. They dump plastic bottles all over the place as well. Yeah, whenever there's a shower, all the drains clogged with plastic bottles. But I'm not seeing any reference there. And that is an explanation should be given as to why plastic bottles are not included now, given the fact that it takes a longer time. And to me, it's a nuisance. Something else, Mr. Speaker, I believe that should go hand in hand with this bill is public information, public education. Yes, the hoteliers are on board, or the stakeholders, but the ordinary man and woman who sells a little barbecue at the side of the road and it depends on the styrofoam content, he doesn't know what we're talking about. You know, we talk about biodegradable and non-biodegradable. We have to reach out to these people and convince them of the health hazards involved, maybe one by one. Let them know that there are certain health hazards involved by using those containers. Because unless we bring them on board, Mr. Speaker, we will be talking over their heads. And we cannot ignore the people at that level. So I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, yes, let us move in that direction, but let us bring all of our people on board with this thing. And let them know at the same time what are the alternatives. Yes, we are saying get rid of this, but what are we promoting? Some of the hotels have, as you said, something that they're trying, yeah, but is that done in on a commercial level that we could get the entire population to come on board with? I don't know. So yes, let us get rid over a period of time, but at the same time, let us create the environment where we can have substitute products. We have seen what happened before. We started off with paper bags, as we said. When we went to the shop, we buy sugar, a pound of sugar in brown paper bag. And they said, no, get rid of that. Let's use plastic. Now we are saying get rid of plastic. What are we going back to, the paper bag, or are we using alternatives? What are the alternatives? Does the ordinary man know what are the alternatives that we are promoting? So, Mr. Speaker, while I fully support, and again, this could be the basis for creating new entrepreneurs, bringing people on board on a commercial level to produce those items. But what are they? I'm not seeing it. I'm not hearing about them. Some talk about bamboo. What, bamboo? Yeah, that's good, but can we produce that in commercial level? So I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, while we move in the direction which I support, preserving the environment, if there are health issues, let me know what the health issues are, or let the people know what the health issues are involved, and then let us promote alternatives, viable, sustainable alternatives to what we are condemning at this point in time. But to me, Mr. Speaker, most important of all, we have to go back to the definition and have clarity as to what exactly we are talking about. Because what we may consider to be non-biodegradable could have some beneficial effects if we can have it recycled and turn into something that is useful. So we need some more clarity on those issues, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honourable Representative for St. Patrick West. Honourable Representative for St. George Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to respond to some of the critically important and relative good points made by the member from St. Patrick's West. With respect to the nation, for everyone understanding the various products that will be classified and deemed as dangerous, etc., etc. Extremely good point, Mr. Speaker. I wish to refer to Clause 2 and the manner in which it will be done. It says application and designation of non-biodegradable products. So all that the member had mentioned will be defined and must be defined. And he made more important points that do not leave it in a definition within this house or within the ministry, etc. We need to go down to the people, the layman, the person who actually throws the bottle into the river, so that he understands, Mr. Speaker. He said this act shall apply with respect to any product that the minister designates as a non-biodegradable product pursuant to subsection 2. So all the things that he mentioned and more, there's some may come in later in the next 5 years or 10 years that we will then find to be dangerous, non-biodegradable. The minister may by order publicize in the Gazette, subject to affirmative resolution, prescribe anything as a non-biodegradable product. So everything that the minister mentioned, the plastic bottle, the system, the other things like that, all of them are trapped within this. Again, the important point that he made. Yes, he made that point. And then we must go again to let everyone know what the product is, Mr. Speaker. And he says an order under subsection 2 shall set out in respect of the non-biodegradable product, that is after we've published it in the Gazette, and we educate the people, the commencement date for application of section 4. Section 4 is really start with the ban. So if we get a new product, it's a pot spoon is a new product, then after we put it in the Gazette, we must set the commencement date for the banning of pot spoons. So it is all done here, but the regulations are the protocol that will really set and explain everything, Mr. Speaker. He said the commencement date for application of Section 5, where you stop importation, right, in the first phase, and you stop use in the next phase, and you stop the sale in the next phase, Mr. The commencement date for application of Section 6. So all of these things, these are the law, but the regulations where the detail will be. So the point made by the member, Mr. Speaker, is critical, and we should learn from this when the regulations come into effect, the protocol that should be used in going forward. So all that he said, Mr. Speaker, captured within the Act. I think what you want to say, as many people say, the devil is in the details. Let me see the regulations. Mr. Speaker, and I know regulations have been drafted for categories, all the categories that he has mentioned, Mr. Speaker. He has not seen it yet because we cannot publish it until this comes into effect, because this is what will give teeth, the authority to publish those regulations, Mr. Speaker. So, yes, he's very correct, but I can assure my colleague that all of these things are in train. But I still want to commend Mr. Speaker the important point that he has made. It should not be just for us among here and for those in the ministry and those in the hotel sectors. It must be for right. Since from primary school, I think I'm here alluding to, from the primary school, from pre-primary school. Once we designate something as a poor material, we shall get down from the pre and the primary and the wider cross-section of the population. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
George, Northeast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too rise in support of this bill as presented by the member for St. John's. But as the member for St. George South is present here, the member for St. Patrick's West made a lot of very important points. And probably the one that you missed the most is that this document was presented to us yesterday that we have to debate on today. Mr. Speaker, as one with a science background in chemistry, and usually this in terms of our environment, research, development, and manufacturing, and the degradation of certain materials, and you ask where styrofoam comes in, probably it is sort of an eyesore to our people. But the question asked, in terms of the breakdown over 50 years, what are some of the substances that are leached out when they are broken down? Or even while they contain the food, if they're made from benzene derivative, it is known that benzene can be a carcinogenic. And when we look at it, maybe we might have the bottle, in the glass bottle in the environment for 5,000 years, but it was there even before because we know glass is made from melted sand. But styrofoam is manufactured from organic chemicals. Mr. Speaker, as we seek to make a better environment for our children, I think this is a step in the right direction. And if this is a step in the right direction, we have to dig deeper in order to protect our environment. I heard the member for St. George South mention that the guys would dive the shoals and pick up all the plastics and the glass in the ocean. I had an experience about 1.5 years ago, Mr. Speaker. We were painting the retaining walls Constantine to Vendome. And I remember when we got to the retaining wall between Constantine and Vendome, that's the new piece of project that we did. The youth of St. George Northeast, we were doing it. And around midday when we get to that stretch of wall and everybody was on that wall painting, and we took a look behind the wall, we were pleasantly surprised that behind those retaining walls had become a dump heap for empty coconut shells. And some of them were still in the bags that probably they would come, cut the coconut, sell it, and on the way up to wherever they come from, the bag just go over the wall. I mean, the pile was almost as high as this building. And, you know, we had to get the Ministry of Health and the police involved, and the young people were shocked because as you cut the top of the coconut, you empty it out behind the wall, and it contains water, and we talk about Zika and dengue and all those stuff. And we have in this country, Mr. Speaker, to have a more environmentally friendly mindset, not just for non-biodegradable, but for everything else. For everything else. And I may say that let's exercise a bit of temperance in terms of what we use, because we might go from non-styrofoam to paper, but sometimes every paper bag that you make, some tree dies somewhere. Where do we strike a balance, Mr. Speaker? And a balance must be struck. I have seen in the United States, well, maybe we do not have that kind of technology yet, but the styrofoam is ground into pellets and it is put into compost that is used in the compost. And most times if you go to buy a bag of garden potting soil, you will see this white thing inside it. It is styrofoam, but they find a way to use it. But maybe we are not there as yet. So, Mr. Speaker, let us, every time we go out there, and you know, I heard the members of St. Mark mention, and I remember my grandmother, that they would get the old flour bags, the white one, and cut it to make the handle bags. And that is what they would go shopping with. You know, Mr. Speaker, I believe that we have to make our people more mindful, that we use what we have and become more environmentally friendly so that we can save our planet for generations to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Parliamentary Representative for St. George Northeast. Parliamentary Representative for St. John.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know that the member from St. Patrick West, yes, he made some very good observations. And as I could say, Mr. Speaker, sometimes you know that you're between a rock and a hard place, because we know that the citizens, it's a way of life using plastic. But so right now, we know it's bad, so we have to start somewhere. And this is a start. And as time goes on, the plastic bottles, the Boston, the chubby that we see going on in the ocean, then those will be added to the list. But at this point in time, we know that at least we start in some place. Before it was all talk. And I know that the member from St. George Northeast, I guess it's a mistake he made when he said the styrofoam takes 50 years, but I think it's more like 500 years. Yes. So, styrofoam? Yes. So, Mr. Speaker, according to the Non-biodegradable Waste Control Bill 2018, it will seek to control or specified non-biodegradable products by establishing prohibitions on 3 levels. 1, prohibition of the importation and manufacture of the products. 2, prohibition on the sale and offer for sale of the products. And 3, prohibition of sale and offer of sale of food in or within the products. Clause 2 provides for this bill to apply in respect to items pre-described as non-biodegradable products. And the clause 4 provides for the prohibition of production and importation of non-biodegradable products with a maximum criminal penalty of a fine of $25,000 upon summary conviction. Clause 5 seeks to empower the minister with responsibility for the environment to authorize the importation or manufacture of such products. So, Mr. Speaker, what is saying, so the minister would still have the discretion to still depends on the circumstance, cause things to be imported based on the requirements of it. The first level, Mr. Speaker, of the prohibition is anticipated to take effect on the 1st September 2018. The second prohibition is anticipated to take effect on January 1st, 2019. The third level of prohibition is anticipated to take effect on the 1st February 2019. Accordingly, the complete ban on styrofoam containers should be implemented by the 1st February 2019. So in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I know that this has been in the making for a very long time, and there's a lot of people that have pushed for this. But there's a few names that I would just like to mention who are really instrumental. So I want to express my appreciation to the team in the Ministry of Climate Resilience, also to Ms. Janine Bernard at the drafting unit from the Ministry of Legal Affairs, all the importers and the stakeholders group that had come and contributed in the consultations. We had Ms. Fosret and Mr. Parks from the Customs Department that has been very instrumental in working on the tariffs and how they could implement the ban. We have Mr. Ernie James from the Trade Division and the Policy Unit of the Ministry of Finance. So, Mr. Speaker, I think the ministry is also looking at some seal of compliance for the early adopters, for the people who have started using this. So, Mr. Speaker, at this point, I must express appreciation. Sorry, I'll conclude now. We have, just in conclusion, I would just like to say that we as a people, we all have a moral responsibility to our children and grandchildren to provide them with a place to live that is safe and healthy, and also to import safe and healthy toys and things for, for their benefit. So I call on all of us to join to ban the styrofoam and also the use of it and the single-use plastic for the sake of keeping Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique safe, healthy, and pure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Representative for St. John. Honourable members, the question is that the bill be read a second time. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Non-biodegradable Waste Control Act 2018.
Honourable Representative for St. John.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause.
Honourable members, the question is that this Honourable House resolves itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable members, this House now stands in committee.
Clause 2, application and designation of non-biodegradable products.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 2, application and designation of non-biodegradable products, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 3, interpretation.
Honorable members, the question is that interpretation, Clause 3, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 4, prohibition, production, and importation of non-biodegradable products.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 4, prohibition and production and importation of non-biodegradable products, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 5, prohibition of sale or offer for sale of non-biodegradable products.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 5 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 6, prohibition of sale of food in non-biodegradable products.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 6 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 7, cost of storage and disposal of non-biodegradable products.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 7 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 1, short title.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 1, short title, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable Representative.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the House resumes and the chairman of the committee reports progress on the bill.
Honorable members, the question is that this Honorable House resumes and the chairman of committee reports progress on the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable members, this Honorable House now resumes. I have to report that the bill was considered by a committee of the whole House and passed without amendments. Honorable Representative, St. John's.
Yes. I beg to move that the chairman's report be adopted.
Honorable members, the question is that the chairman's report be adopted. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable Representative for St. John.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the third reading of the bill.
Honorable members, the question proposed is that the bill be read a third time. Honorable members, the question is that the bill be read a third time and passed. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Non-biodegradable Waste Control Act 2018.
Honorable Representative for St.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to introduce for first reading a bill for an act shortly entitled Customs Amendment Act 2018.
An act to amend the Customs Act number 9 of 2015, shortly entitled Customs Amendment Act 2018.
Mr. Speaker, I beg one standing order of the House be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all the stages at this sitting. Aye. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the second reading of the bill. Mr. Speaker, this Customs Amendment Bill follows the earlier bill we passed with the Advanced Passenger Information Bill. You recall that we have passed Advanced Passenger Information. The information will be sent before. Now this one, under the Customs Amendment Bill, is saying that the advanced cargo information have to be sent before. It's a parallel bill, so we had advanced passenger, now advanced cargo information must be sent to the implementing agency for crime and security, that is INPACS. The INPACS is a regional crime and security agency. And so they're requesting that member states of INPACS, which CARICOM member states, all agree that they will amend the Customs Act to send this advanced cargo information. So to do that, you need to amend the current Customs Act because it do not give the controller the powers to send this advanced cargo. So first section amendment is made to Section 2 of the Principal Act to insert advanced cargo information, which means the manifest, airway bill, or bill of lading information must be sent. The cargo stores, including all imports, exports, in transit and transshipment of goods, must be sent, as I said, in advance. The Advanced Cargo Information System means the electronic manifest single window for ACI data interchange. So just like you have the Advanced Passenger Information System, you now have the Advanced Cargo Information System. I said it's very similar, straight down the line. So one deal with passengers, now we come in to deal with cargo. And you said how this advanced cargo going to be sent. So if you send it anything before it gets there, INPACS that regulates, that deals with crime and security will have the information beforehand because you have to send the manifest or the airways. And so the amendment to Section 2 is to introduce these new terms as ACIS, INPACS, cargo manifest. What that means, it explains that within this section that we amended, and the regional space means the collective territories of the parties to ACIS, which comprise the CARICOM member states. As I indicated, INPACS is a CARICOM agency that deals with crime and security. So this first amendment is to introduce this part. The other amendment to the Principal Act is the Section 20A, Mr. Speaker. Section 20A is amended by inserting the word proper officer where it appears and the words through the Advanced Cargo Information System. And by inserting before the word passenger, the word advance. So every time you see the word passenger, you put advance. Advanced passenger, advanced cargo, sorry, and advanced passenger. The word advance, because that is the basis of the law. They want it in advance before it gets there. You have to submit it so they will know what is coming into the port. And in subsection 3, by inserting the word proper officer, there was through the Advanced Cargo Information System. So I said, Mr. Chair, this is a more or less a regional bill that gives impacts the right to obtain this information. And it says in 3B that the controller may share the information contained within these ACIS with the entities approved by the minister by order. So the various entities that are approved by order can share that information. And in 3D it says the advanced cargo information collected under this act shall be retained for a period not exceeding 7 years from the date of collection of the information. So impacts could hold information and store it for a period not exceeding 7 years. And the other section, Mr. Thing, want to repeal at the current Schedule 1A, and a new schedule will be introduced. This new schedule, Mr. Speaker, sets out clearly the information that is required under the electronic manifest management system as SEQUITA. So you have a new management system, so a new schedule is proposed here as part of this amendment. So this is the basis of the Customs Amendment Bill, Mr. Speaker, to have advanced cargo information, and the amendment outlines how it will be done, and the Schedule 1A is the electronic format explains the information that is necessary. And so that is a critical piece of amendment that we need to make, because all CARICOM member states have to comply with this regulation in order to get this advanced cargo information to impacts beforehand. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Representative for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the bill as presented by the Honourable Member for St. David's. Mr. Speaker, we live in an island, tri-island state, but our island is not isolated or insulated from current affairs of the world. We heard today of our increased passenger arrivals. We continually seek to export more agricultural products as well, and in particular, we speak of the common market. We heard our Prime Minister make reference to that as well. With all of this comes compliance. This amendment is, as the representative from St. David says, is a part 2, an obvious follow-on. If already in this House we have passed, accepted and passed, the advanced passenger list or information that has to be given, it is reasonable to expect, and I think the only reason that it is coming afterwards and didn't come at the same time is that it took a little more working because there's a little more information involved and there are more parties that are involved with respect to that passenger information. But if you look at the schedule of this amendment that is provided, the information that is being requested is logical information. Is information that, one, gives the relevancy with respect to the type of cargo, the conditions that the cargo must be kept, and in fact, in most cases, if that type of cargo is being sent by sea, that information is received by the consignee in advance, and the recipient is shared already. Because of air travel times, it is being insisted now, and we are being asked to comply with the passing of that information beforehand. And I truly believe that that is twofold. It guarantees greater safety in air travel. The passengers themselves who will be on an aircraft that is also carrying cargo, with passing of the advanced information of that cargo, it guarantees better safety of those passengers. And also, as has been implied here, it also allows us to ensure that our borders are not used to or penetrated with respect to those who are carrying out criminal activities or smuggling through air traffic. So as we seek to have more and more flights coming in and out of Grenada, those flights will not just be carrying passengers, but will be carrying cargo. As we seek to have more and more cargo leave Grenada, we have to make sure that our rules and regulations, our laws, ensure that our air cargo leaving and our air traffic leaving is compliant to international standards. And in this case, the regional standards that we are complying to are the international standards that are being asked for by IATA and the other agencies, Mr. Speaker. So I rise in full support of the bill or the amendment as proposed by my brother from St. David's. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Representative for St. George South. Honourable Representative for St. George Northeast.
Mr. Speaker, if it was a different time and a different occasion, maybe I could not have risen to support this. The declaration of the manifest from one country to another, especially when you're talking about cargo. Mr. Speaker, you know I could take a whole different drift on that. My foreparents were seafaring people in Carriacou and Petit Martinique. And my grandfather, my cousins, I mean, I just maybe choose a little different path. A few years ago, Mr. Speaker, if I rise here in this house here to support this bill, I may not be able to go back to Carriacou and Petit Martinique easily. But, Mr. Speaker, it has its importance in that the times and seasons are changing. And before we talk about smuggling and contraband goods, now I went to home just recently, and the guy said to me he was going to the customs to declare. So I asked what happened to this. He said to me, they told him that, you know, we know what you have before you come. So I said, there you go, you can't do it anymore. And now, Mr. Speaker, after retirement, or after leaving this place, I was thinking about going back home and going back to my former life. But now that would make it very difficult for me, because at least all the goods that we are living with, wherever we live in it, will have to be sent to the next port of call when we go to clear out. And this is important, Mr. Speaker, because it will help our country as to exactly what is going from one country to another. If I can recall our little history, I believe it was around 1972, there was an explosion aboard a vessel traversing between Trinidad and Grenada. City of St. George's, if I may recall, and a number of my family members went down. And it was stated that the boxes came on board. They did not really know, but they were carrying explosives from Trinidad to Grenada. And to know what is there is important to customs and to our country. I do believe that it was a few years ago when some ship left the European countries and dumped a set of garbage in one of the African countries. And there was no declaration as to what goes, but when the research was done, it was hazardous material that they used Africa as a dumping ground. And for us in our country to know what is coming in, the condition of what is coming in, and not only the amount that is coming in, is very important to customs and also to revenue. So, Mr. Speaker, I would support the member for St. David's at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Representative for St. George Northeast. Honourable Representative for St. David.
Mr. Chair, I want to thank the members who supported, and I wasn't thinking this bill would have the outcome that the member from St. George Northeast talk about. But I'm happy he pointed it out, because I know the public listening. But I don't think he was serious when he said he was thinking about going back to this trade. Because I mean, all is modern now, you know, and it is. It wouldn't be profitable now, as it was before. Because you have to come through customs and everything now. and declare and said it, you know. So I want to thank the two members, Mr. Speaker, and commit the bill to its second reading.
Honourable members, the question is that the bill be read a second time. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Customs Amendment Act 2018.
Parliamentary Representative for St. David.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the House resolves itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause.
Honourable members, the question is that this House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable members, this House now stands in committee.
Clause 2, amendment of Section 2 of the Principal Act.
Honourable members, the question is that Clause 2 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 3, amendment of Section 20A of Principal Act.
Honourable members, the question is that Clause 3 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 4, repeal and substitution of Schedule 1A of Principal Act.
Honourable members, the question is that Clause 4 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 1, short title.
Honourable members, the question is that Clause 1, short title, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable Representative for St. David.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the House resumes and the Chairman of Committee report progress on the bill.
Honourable members, the question is that this Honourable House resumes and the Chairman of Committee reports progress on the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable members, this House now resumes. I have to report that the bill was considered by a committee of the whole House and passed without amendment. Honourable Representative St. Davids.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Chairman's report be adopted.
Honourable members, the question is that the Chairman's report be adopted. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable Representative for St. David.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the third reading of the bill and passage.
Honourable members, the question proposed is that the bill be read a third time. Honourable members, the question is that the bill be read a third time and passed. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Customs Amendment Act 2018.
Honourable Representative for, Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I beg to introduce for first reading the bill for an act shortly entitled Proceeds of Crime Amendment Bill 2018.
An act to amend the Proceeds of Crime Act number 6 of 2012, shortly entitled Proceeds of Crime Amendment Act 2018.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the relevant standing orders of the House be suspended in order to take the bill through all stages at this sitting.
Honorable members, the question is that the regular standing orders of the House be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all its stages at this sitting. Those who have that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the second reading of the bill.
Remember, the question proposed is that the bill be read a second time. Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I think we in this honorable place have seen the propagation and the passage of a suite of legislation, most of them associated with or having to do with crime. Many of them had the origin, Mr. Speaker, the genesis from outside of the Caribbean, and a few from within the region, Mr. Speaker. If we looked at the last bill, Mr. Speaker, the emphasis of the bill was really to bring impact into the play, Mr. Speaker. Yes, we had passed a bit before, but the impact is implementing agency for crime and security services. So if we really want to bring crime under control, Mr. Speaker, and within the radar, what I want to make clear, Mr. Speaker, sometimes the drive for it does not come from CARICOM or from members. It came from the external community, and many of the things they have been foreign to us. That does not mean, Mr. Speaker, that we should not move, and we have moved on it, because as we develop, we know that we're targeting those that do not know much, so that, they can feast and harvest upon us. But at the same time, Mr. Speaker, sometimes we have to be very much aware from whence these things came, Mr. Speaker. This anti-money laundering amendment, Mr. Speaker, anti-money laundering and combating terrorist financing, the AML-CTF Commission, and the Financial Intelligence Unit, Mr. Speaker, are the regulating bodies that are responsible for supervision of the regime in Grenada. So crime, there's money laundering. Crime, again, normally comes from drugs. So you get the finances from crime, and so you have to clean it, as you say, and you pass it through money laundering. And then, Mr. Speaker, the important component that we knew not too much about is the CTF, it's combating terrorism financing. Hardly known to the region, Mr. Speaker, but every year, each country must be subjected to an evaluation of all of those things, money laundering and terrorist financing, Mr. Speaker. As a matter of fact, I recall that not too long ago, Mr. Speaker, and this bill refers to it, you'll see, Mr. Speaker, a not-for-profit organization. Who would have thought that these would come in under the microscope to be thought about with respect to crime? But lo and behold, somewhere in the Middle East, Mr. Speaker, some religious bodies were getting the financing paid by that sect in order for terrorism activities. So the external community, the powerhouse as they be, decided all such bodies must now come under the radar. And so churches, not-for-profit organizations, some of them screamed mighty here, Mr. Speaker, but there's nothing much that they could do, particularly when you had evidence that not them here, but others away in the same religious community were involved in not laundering this time, Mr. Speaker, but getting financing from citizens in order to push, Mr. Speaker, with terrorism financing. So we do have the law passed, Mr. Speaker, but now we're saying we want to bring everybody, they're under the radar, but in name. But how do we ensure that they comply? So we must set up a register. This is what this bill is saying. Set up a register and register everybody. Whether it's banks, whether it's system like that, they're there and they're working, but we have to report to the powers that be. And now, Mr. Speaker, the Commission and the FIU, these are the two monitoring agents. To fulfill their obligation, they must ensure that they know the people who are there. So this bill, Mr. Speaker, is requiring every person They know that they're under the radar, but now you must go and register. And we must be able to monitor you, Mr. Speaker. The Commission is unable to determine the number of regulated entities. So when they ask Grenada, how many people are there? And we go to be evaluated, we don't really know. Even if we knew, that would not be good enough. They must be regulated. The business of compliance is mandatory, and the Anti-Money Laundering and Combating Terrorist Financing Commission must be able to do their work. So we're enacting legislation, Mr. Speaker, now to get all of these done. So we will see, Mr. Speaker, the proceeds of Crime Amendment Bill introduces a Part 5A to provide for the regulations of these entities. Clause 39 provides for the insertion of two definitions of competent authority and regulated authorities. The competent authority is those who in charge and we regulating this, and the regulated authorities are another group. GAFIN is mainly responsible, Mr. Speaker, because they are the people, they're the commission responsible for financial institution in the region, Mr. Speaker. So first, they must apply, they must be registered, and if they're not registered, Mr. Speaker, they face dangerous consequences. And the Act provides for the authority to remove you off the register. So if you're an entity, a financing entity, and you're not registered, well, according to what you say, Mr. Speaker, you're done dead. Because you're not registered. You can't carry on business. And if you are registered, and you're taken off the register, well, what's it? Why is that person taken off the register? Well, that means your whole financial institution is gone. So it's compliance, Mr. Speaker, and forcing the regulating authorities here to take on everyone. And Mr. Speaker, if you look at those in the schedule, some of the persons that they're required to pay a fee now, the registered entities, insurance companies, they must be registered. They know that they're under the watchdog, the watch of the Commission, Mr. Speaker, but now they have to pay a small sum. So the money is not it. $500 for insurance companies with asset size of 25 million. Large credit union, over 50 million, $500. Peanuts. It's not the fees, Mr. Speaker. Small credit unions under $50 million, they have to register and pay a yearly registration fee of $300. Money services business, which Fast Cash and these others, Mr. Speaker, $300. Lawyers and law firms and accountants, $300. They must be registered. The $300 is peanuts. But when they're registered, it means that the authority must delve into them and look to see if an accountant has received a $10 million. Where did it come from? And he could pass it out in the books. And to whom did he send it? So the authority must go down at them. And they dare not say, I don't know who they are, because now they're forced to register, Mr. Speaker. We have the NPO, $100, car dealers, $100, dealers in precious stones, $100. You know what this is saying, Mr. Speaker? These are some of the organizations that the authority feel, and it may not have come from Grenada, you know. We may not be doing it in the region at all. But out there, in the big world, they may have evidence of car dealers, of precious stones being used for crime. So you bring in your $400 million, and you just 3 or 4 small bits of diamond, they cost the $400 million. So you turn the money into this small bit of diamond, but when these people come under scrutiny, they would ask, well, where's the one bit of diamond you have? Maybe the reporting structure may say, tell me how many bits of diamond you brought in and how many you sold. So how possible can you sell $300, $400 million worth of dollars of stone in a small piece of time? So everybody, Mr. Speaker, must come under scrutiny and under the watch of the FIU and the commission, Mr. Speaker. I just mentioned these teams. They are only registered entities. We have the large insurance companies, the small ones, credit unions, banks, all of them come under GAFIN. Now, GAFIN must be watching these other institutions not mentioned here, Mr. Speaker. So none shall escape. The issue is, Mr. Speaker, if we sat down here or in the region and determine we will do these things, fine. But I have said at my presentation, on each occasion that we have to deal with these bills, that is the outside pushing them in. We have to take the good from it because we know that we'll be targeted one day and we must be prepared. But at the same time, Mr. Speaker, we must be able to do things and analyze what is good for us. The point I'm making here, Mr. Speaker, is that we don't have any choice in this here. Suppose we're saying that, no, Kadila is the same. You better not make the mistake when we go to be evaluated. And that is my concern with these external bills, that we cannot take the good and leave the bad. Those are my concerns, Mr. Speaker. And I repeat, we have no choice. There are some good, and I will continue to repeat it every time we amend and every time a new bill comes from outside that we force upon us. We know the powers that be. So many of them, Mr. Speaker, and every day we have to deal with it. So I commend this bill for a second reading because we know, Mr. Speaker, that we virtually cannot make many changes to it. We have a big word now, what do you say with the EU? Blacklist. And we know the consequences on our people. So when our people stop us and say, why did you do this and why do you do that? We must be able to explain to them, well, if we didn't do this and we didn't do that, where we would be. And I've seen bigger countries with greater economies just simply say, yes, and I say, Mr. Speaker, well, little Grenada and the Caribbean, boy, what can we do? We like a little something, we get squashed. But I want to make the statement that we here must be cognizant of what we're doing. Like I say, you know, once I know what we're doing, I know the consequences, I could stand up and defend it. What I dislike and would not want to be part of is that I didn't know and it was passed. So I will continue, Mr. Speaker, to make the statements that I make in this honorable place once we have such bill to deal with, Mr. Speaker. I commend the bill for a second reading.
Representative for St. George South.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support to the bill as presented by our Leader of Government Business. Mr. Speaker, I too want to reiterate that as a member of this House, elected by the people, I have all faith in our people, that our people are conducting business legitimately and in compliance with our laws in Grenada. However, for us to make that bold statement to the international community, to the Financial Action Task Force, to the powers that be out there, we sometimes have to pass legislation that enacts certain entities that are able to look at the various businesses that have been listed here, look at their transactions, to be able to prove to the outside world that we are pure Grenada and our citizens are pure and compliant. And that should there be any transaction that is inappropriate, I am most confident that that transaction would probably come from outside and be taking advantage of the gullibility or innocence of our very own people and financial institutions that exist here in Grenada. But in order to ensure that that does not happen, and in order to show the confidence that we have in our people, we sometimes have to come to this House and pass legislation like this very legislation. So, Mr. Speaker, it is from that point of view that I rise in support of this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Representative. Honourable Representative for St. David.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise to give my support to the amendment to the proceeds of crime. Since, Mr. Speaker, with all these electronic means of moving money around, every time we have to make an amendment because it seems as though the people are involved with business always one step ahead, you know. So you always have to come and amend something. So in this act, the commission need to regulate all entities, including non-profit. They was not able to do it. We have to come now and amend it. And next year, the people who involved might try some other way, and we have to come back with regulation again to keep up to them, because things are changing so rapidly. That is why, Mr. Speaker, I think we need to, as a government, to keep up to date with the changes that's taking place internationally. And Mr. Chair, these regulated entities, in 39D, if you change the address, and I read it, if a regulated entity changes its registered office, principal place of business, director, has a change in beneficial ownership, or any other details required for the purpose of registration, it shall, within 14 days of such change, notify the commission in writing. You see, you try to guard against you making other changes in that within 14 days, and if you didn't do that, a regulated entity that fails to notify the commission as required under subsection 1 that I just read, commits an offense and is liable to summary conviction, to a fine of $5,000 and to a further fine of $300 for each day the offense continues. Each day, $300 after, because you must see this to avoid trying. You register now. This is your principal base that you direct, and then you change directorship and you change address, and you can't do that under this act. It is covered. You will be fined, and every day that you commit the offense, you will be fined additionally. And in 39H, it says, without prejudice to any other functions which a competent authority may exercise under any other enactment, the commission may require a competent authority to furnish it with information on its licenses at such time and in such form as the commission may consider necessary to assist and cooperate with the commission in carrying out its regulatory function, notwithstanding anything else. See, I remember Minister Bowen pointed out that when we had the Public Finance Management Act, Fiscal Responsibility Act, the program, and then in each of them they said, notwithstanding anything else, this one will prevail. So which one will prevail? You see, if all of them say that, notwithstanding. I think there was some amendment recently that came to deal with that when he had to deal with NS, because Public Finance Management Act was saying something, and NS Act said something, and both of them must say, wherever you contradict, this one will stand. So here you have it that says, notwithstanding, without prejudice, he says. So any other function, the commission can ask you to provide the information, so that, because when you regulate, you need all the information that to conduct the investigation. So, Mr. Chair, this is a very critical piece of law amendment to the Proceeds of Crime Bill, and therefore I support fully this bill.
Thank you, Honourable Representative for St. David. Honourable Representative for St. George Southeast. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleagues for their contribution, and to stress again at the point made by the member for St. David. So you change address, they look at you suspiciously. Why did you change your address? You change a member on the board, or you change some part of the ownership, it's suspicion, suspicion, suspicion. You can't sell your shares to another person, it's suspicion, suspicion. We must come and evaluate it to see if you are not involved in some crime. And that again, Mr. Speaker, is the trend and the format that we do not like. Let us do things for our development and not with a negative connotation from day one, Mr. Speaker. I thank them for their contribution, and I commend the bill for its second reading.
Honourable members, the question is that the bill be read a second time. Those who are of that opinion, say aye. Of the contrary opinion, say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Proceeds of Crime Amendment Act 2018.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause.
Honorable members, the question is that this Honorable House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. Those who are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion, say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. This Honorable House now stands in committee.
Clause 2, insertion of new Part 5A to Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 2 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 3, amendment to Section 60 of Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 3 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 4, insertion of new schedule to Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 4 forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 1, short title and commencement.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 1, short title and commencement, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the House resumes and the Chairman of the committee reports progress on the bill.
Honorable members, the question is that this Honorable House resumes and the Chairman of Committee reports progress on the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable members, this House now resumes. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the Chairman's report be adopted.
Honorable members, the question is that the Chairman's report be adopted. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the third reading of the bill.
Honorable members, the question proposed is that the bill be read a third time. Honorable members, the question is that the bill be read a third time and passed. Those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to introduce for first reading the bill for an act shortly entitled Grenada Citizenship by Investment Amendment Bill 2018.
A bill for an act to amend the Grenada Citizenship by Investment Act number 15 of 2013.
Leader of Government Business.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the relevant standing orders of the House be suspended in order to take the bill through all stages at this sitting.
Honorable members, the question is that the relevant standing orders of the House be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all its stages at this sitting. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the second reading of the bill.
Honorable members, the question proposed is that the bill be read a second time. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, background to the amendment is in order. Mr. Speaker, when the Grenada Citizenship by Investment Act was passed, there was a provision in there for the Section 11, that is those investors who will get the citizenship by investing into a project in Grenada. They were required to put the funds into an escrow account. Subsequently, Mr. Speaker, there were lots of complaints from these investors, particularly because of the length of time that we took to do the due diligence and to tell them that they were approved or not approved. The requirement of placing some $350,000 into the account, and they may fail, but the important point is, Mr. Speaker, instead of being told within 60 or 90 days, sometimes 6 months down the line, they're told and the monies are tied up there. And lo and behold, they want to move that monies into Dominica, Antigua. But more so, Mr. Speaker, in an environment when you have competition, they were tending to move away because they'll move into another program. And they don't like to come and have their monies tied up there, Mr. Speaker. So the provision, after discussing with other persons and consultants, the provision for putting the money into an escrow was removed. So what they did, Mr. Speaker, they gave the monies directly into those people who are doing the project in Grenada. So the agent, the external agent, and the local agent will work, they'll put the money into the hands of the local agent, or they'll put the money directly, if we build in Hotel X, they'll give it to the investor in Hotel X. Mr. Speaker, looking from external, we see problems existing in that way. The investor came, he put his money there, and he's waiting to be approved. But he now places the money directly into the project. One, the state will be the one responsible if that particular investor who is building Hotel X, not the one who's applying for the citizenship, but the investor, that investor is getting a lot of $350,000 from maybe 1,000 people to put into his hotel. What if, Mr. Speaker, he does not put all the $350,000 into the project? So now we're looking at what is happening around, and to safeguard our name, and to safeguard the name of the program, it is required that the monies do not go directly to the investor, but the monies go into, Mr. Speaker, an escrow account that the CBI committee could monitor and say, yes, you get it. Where are you with your project? You have received 40 million already. You have another 40 in the escrow account, and we'll be watching you to see that you really invest it into the project. So we are taking in front, Mr. Speaker, having regard to the many areas that we have looked at, to the many forums that you have gone out to, because people from Grenada or representatives continue to go abroad and to meet with other persons and to learn of the problems that they encounter. And so, Mr. Speaker, we here, before we fall deeply into any form of disrepute, it is recommended, and Mr. Speaker, I move that we ensure that the money does not go directly to that hotel investor or that project investor, but that it is placed into an escrow, which will now give the CBI and the state the ability to manage, so that we will have no fallout, Mr. Speaker. The amendment starts, Mr. Speaker, by removing or seeking to replace the provision for the escrow account, Mr. Speaker. It says Section 8 of the Principal Act, Clause 2, is amended by repealing subsection 4 and substituting, therefore, the following new subsections. Within a period as may be described by the Minister in regulations, the applicant shall pay the balance of the processing fee. So they will pay the application fee, they will come in. And then the CBI will do what it has to do based on the regulations. But they must now pay the balance of the processing fee, which is to pay for due diligence to be done on them, etc. But they have two roads, Mr. Speaker, either going into the transformation fund, which is not a problem at all because this goes into the hands of the CBI committee and the Treasury of Grenada eventually. It says they will deposit the required contribution into the National Transformation Fund established by the government to be held there until the registration of the permanent residence or citizenship of the investment has been completed. In other words, once you put it into a fund that government has oversight over, that's not too much of a problem because you know that you will get back your money if that is get back, if you fail a program. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, B provides for, you must place the contribution if you go in the other route, that is investing in a project so that you can get your citizenship. You can place, the fund will now have to be placed in an irrevocable escrow account. Previously, it was going directly to the person building the hotel or the person doing whatever project it is. And the amendment is required now to go into an escrow account. And managed by a local agent, so you're putting the money into the account. We're not saying it's not government money. That stream does not come to government at all. Only about a $50,000 is government component. But that will go to the investor. So it's the CBI applicant monies, and it is his marketing agent, and it is his local agent that will be in control of the fund. And it will be pursuant to such guidelines issued by the minister in regulations and any guidelines which may be issued by the committee. So you put the money in escrow account. Now the minister will make regulation one. He could determine that this money will leave the escrow account at what point in time. When should it leave? Maybe after you prove that you're a good person from due diligence. And again, when will it leave? After the CBI committee has looked at the project to which it should go and see that project is doing well. Otherwise, that committee, that money may never leave that escrow account. And if a project is doing badly, the minister and the CBI could make guidelines and say, leave this money in this escrow account, ask the applicant to take back his money, or ask the applicant if he wants to do another project in Grenada because we have suspicions about a particular project. So this, we feel, Mr. Speaker, could safeguard our program in Grenada. And it could safeguard the applicant because the applicant could get back his money. What will happen, Mr. Speaker, if an applicant, or 3 applicants, each one of them puts $350,000, $1.05 million into a project? It is not a government owner. It's a private sector project. But if he loses that money and that project never gets off the ground, it is Grenada. It is Grenada's program. And the amount of monies that we earn from this as a grant to support our budget and to transform the country, our program is dead and we're gone. So it behoves us, Mr. Speaker, to do what we have to do to safeguard the names. And not only that, Mr. Speaker, I think we're ranking way up there in, I think the Minister for Foreign Affairs will say our program is ranking way up there. If it's not number 1, maybe it's half, and maybe 1.5. So tell you how far up we are, Mr. Speaker. I don't even think we're bracing second. So what will happen if we destroy our project, Mr. Speaker? And we must report to Parliament the sum of monies. And you see the many, many $1 million that come in that we could use as grant to support our budget. And if we fail to heed warning signs among us, and if we fail to heed what is learned from our members going abroad, and saying, listen, our country was crushed and killed because of this. And when we look at ours, we see loopholes. We must close it, Mr. Speaker. I therefore recommend this amendment for its second reading.
Honourable Parliamentary Representative for the Tongue of St. George.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to echo the sentiments of the member for Southeast St. George's. In fact, Grenada is known as the Lamborghini of the programs, particularly in the Caribbean. My friend says Rolls Royce. And we need to keep it that way. The fact is that the world is littered with programs that made mistakes. And I think what my friend is indicating is that we have to learn from the mistakes. And what this bill is aimed at doing is learning from the mistakes from other countries. And there's some other countries where they're littered with projects that were started by persons who may not be on the up and up. And therefore, the investor loses out. But the thing is, it's not the investor alone. In fact, the person or persons who lose most would be the citizens of the countries that the programs belong to. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, that the CBI program, Citizenship by Investment program, is an extremely important program for our economy. You know, what the program really is, there are persons in the world who want to have ease of travel, they want to be able to travel, so they want Grenadian citizenship to assist them in that regard. Some of them want to come live in Grenada, but don't want to do it now, and they are investing. The truth is that even countries like the United States, Canada, Malta, there are many large countries. In fact, the United States, in a period of a couple of years, made a few $1 billion off of a similar program that they have. You know, Canada has a very extensive program. I remember when I lived in Canada, in Vancouver, in the 1990s, and Hong Kong was coming back. There are many Chinese who came to Canada, invested in Canada, and got Canadian citizenship. So it's not a program unique to these islands. Some people have us believe that these are programs that we invented. These are programs that we piggybacked on programs from the United States, Canada, you know, Malta, Australia. Most of these large countries, they call them by a different name, but certainly they are CBI programs. Our program, Mr. Speaker, is one that is seen as among the best. For, you know, this is not a debate about the program, but certainly there are many features in our program. And as the member for Southeast says, sometimes we take long with due diligence, because as I say when I go abroad to speak about this program, there is one thing we will not compromise on, is a due diligence process. We do not want anybody in the program who is not on the up and up. In other words, we don't want, you know, especially bearing in mind the history of some of the programs in some of the other islands where there are persons who are found to be trying to hide from, you know, certain intelligence agencies or certain security forces and to get a passport to hide. That is not what the Grenada program is about. The Grenada program is about real investment for the people of this country. And that is why we have been encouraging investors to come in agriculture, in tourism, to invest in areas that really affect the lives of our people. And I think that is what this bill is trying to do, to ensure that when investors come in, they feel secure because their money is not given to the developer or whatever without the proper procedure, and that if there comes a problem in the development, the money is there, and the government will be able to reimburse or do whatever is necessary to make them whole. So I want to support this amendment, but I also want to say that you know, we have to do as much as is possible, each one of us, to ensure that the CBI program is not only well run, but that our people understand the importance of the program. You know, you hear people talking about transformation fund. It comes from the CBI program. The CBI program runs well in the United States. It runs well in Canada. It runs well in Australia. It runs well in Malta. It's running well in Moldova, who has a new program now, and it runs well in Grenada. So the idea, and of course there are people who would be naysayers with the program, some of them because they have interests other than this. some of them want to destroy our program so their program can get all of the investors. So we know that. But that is why my friend from the Southeast in introducing this is saying that we have to ensure that our CBI program remains clean, it remains one that is safe for the investor, and it remains one that has the credibility so that when people hear about CBI in Grenada, they say, you know, I was saying this the other day, Minister of Tourism, that the same way our tourism industry is a kind of pristine one, a kind of unique one, a kind of, you know, top of the line one, as we say, you know, the same way our CBI program is seen. Grenada is not a huge country, so whatever we do, we have to do it well, and we have to do it in a way that brings maximum returns to our country. So we are not interested in getting 20,000 applicants. We are interested in getting, if it's 1,000 or 2,000, but persons who are credible and persons who add value to the country without bringing any kind of negativity or negative press to the country. So I want to say, Member for Southeast, I fully support this, and I think it goes a long way in ensuring that our investors and our people feel that we are doing the best for the country by securing the interests of both the investor and Grenada. Thank you, and I support. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Representative. Honourable Representative for St. David.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this amendment, given the fact that we have been constantly looking at ways of improving. On return to office in 2013, we reintroduced the citizenship by investment. And this time we said we must make sure that we have it right. We have to get it right this time. And I'm pleased, Mr. Speaker, to stand up here to say today, after 5 years of introducing it, we are ranked #1 because we got it right. And therefore, this amendment is to further strengthen the system, because we have two categories. Section 10 that says you could contribute to a transformation fund to be used by the government for transformational purposes, and a Section 11 which says you can invest 350,000. 50,000 will go to the government, 300,000 to your project. But we have to ensure that the money goes to the project. And how else we could ensure it? This is saying you must put it in an irrevocable escrow account with oversight from the CBI committee. If you don't do that, and the money goes to the investor, and he didn't make the investment, the whole program is at risk, you know. The whole thing will be destroyed from moving, and you could destroy it very quickly, you know. Because some big countries in the world don't like this program, you know. Right? So they don't like it. So any mistake you make, they will quickly come down on you. So this amendment is coming at the right time, and it will ensure greater efficiency and transparency in our program, and therefore I fully support this amendment.
Thank you, Honourable Representative for St. David. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleagues for the very meaningful contribution. And as a member for the Town of St. George and Minister for Foreign Affairs indicated the many countries involved. I could recall in 1989 when a business person, I was in Grand Lake, says, well, you're good in business, you better come to England. I say, oh, I'll come to England and do what? He says, £50,000. And I was saying, what kind of system you paying £50,000? I was not aware of these programs. And lo and behold, and at that point in time, Mr. Speaker, at $250,000 AC dollars, and I was just about to start to build a property. So the monies, what happened? Maybe he knew that, perhaps he didn't know that. So he pay a £50,000 and you could come up in England and work in pounds. And I said, you know, and I shook my head because it was unbelievable. I said, somewhere in the end he was trying to scam me or something that I didn't know. Because I never know of a program in those days that you could pay some money and get legitimate citizenship in a country. And today, Mr. Speaker, we hear those who are against the program, you know. These are first world countries here. The G7 countries, Mr. Speaker, first world. And they're doing this. And if we don't know yet things about they're selling the passport and they're doing this and they're doing that. So I say Britain would not have been selling a passport Mr. Speaker, we must understand the program, and we must do much more to make people understand, what it's all about. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a very important amendment that will ensure that our program remains on top and that we benefit from it for the people of the country, for the economy. And it is playing a tremendous role in the way we are today, in our growth and in everything that we do today, Mr. Speaker. So I recommend the bill for its second reading.
Honourable members, the question is that this bill be read a second time. Those who are of that opinion, say aye. Of the contrary opinion, say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Greater Citizen by Investment Amendment Bill 2018.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the House resolves itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause.
Honourable members, the question is that this Honourable House resolves itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable members, this Honourable House now stands in committee.
Clause 2, Amendment of Section 8 of Principal Act.
Honourable members, the question is that Clause 2, Amendment of Section 8 of Principal Act, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 1, Short Title and Commencement.
Honourable members, the question is that Clause 1, Short Title and Commencement, forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the House resumes and the Chairman of the committee reports progress on the bill.
Honourable members, the question is that this Honourable House resumes and the Chairman of committee reports progress on the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable members, this House now stands in committee. Sorry. The House now resumes. I have to report that the bill was considered by a committee of the whole House and passed without amendments. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the Chairman's report be adopted.
Honourable members, the question is that the Chairman's report be adopted. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the third reading of the bill.
Honourable members, the question proposed is that the bill be read a third time. Honourable members, the question is that the bill be read a third time and passed. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Bill for an act shortly entitled Greater Citizen by Investment Amendment Bill Act 2018.
You want to go?
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to introduce for first reading the bill for an act shortly entitled Amendments to Pension Act 2018.
A bill for an act to amend the Pension Act, Cap 233, the Pensions, Prison Officers Act, Cap 235, the Pensions, School Teachers Act, Cap 236, and the Police Pensions Act, Cap 245, shortly entitled Amendments to Pension Acts 2018.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the relevant standing orders of the House be suspended in order to take the bill through all stages of this sitting.
Honorable members, the question is that the relevant standing orders of the House be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all its stages of this sitting. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the second reading of the bill.
Honorable members, the question proposed is that the bill be read a second time. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment is necessary in order to make legal the payment of pensions to persons who joined the public service after the 4th of April 1983 and before the 22nd February 1985. Mr. Speaker, we're all aware of the issue before us and the pronouncements made that persons who joined the public service after April 83 and before the 22nd of February 1985 will be paid as if they were in the public service. And we know that in 1983, or the Pension Disqualification Act, you see, from 1983, disqualified the payment to pension, Mr. Speaker, people in the public service receiving pension. Mr. Speaker, many people are of the opinion that the Constitution guarantees them a pension, and that pension is the same throughout, and that Parliament cannot change that pension. That is incorrect, Mr. Speaker, as many learned members have said so. What it guarantees is that you receive the pension that was in place when you joined the service. That is what is guaranteed. And still up to today, Mr. Speaker, a lot of persons do not realize this. So some of our members, public service, saying, well, why are you fighting the union? You know that you have to pay me as the others were paid since in 1965 and 70 and 83. No. The Pension Disqualification Act was passed in 1983. Said 1983. In fact, the case that went before of a particular lady indicated procedures. Maybe it was passed, but it was gazetted, and in between that period, maybe April and May, that person won at that point. But in a general consensus, Mr. Speaker, all the acts passed by the People's Revolutionary Government was deemed to only have come into effect on the 22nd of February 1985, when the legitimate democratic parliament, in all respect, upheld these bills. So all of them took effect on that particular date when they were gazetted. Yeah, because whether it's legitimate or illegitimate, and so they have no effect until gazetted. So that must be the date, the 22nd of February 1985. So without a doubt, Mr. Speaker, union, government, everybody working on the advice of one a more learned gentleman, I think this is no longer in dispute. So the 4th of April 1983 should really be the 22nd of February 1985. And all the acts, the pension acts of public servants here, Mr. Speaker, the date must be upgraded because the disqualification came into effect on the 4th. So the effective date of the disqualification is now 22nd February. So we have a mention to amendment to the Pensions Act, Chapter 233, and this will be changing the date from 4th April 1983 to the 22nd of February 1985. So all acts, Mr. Speaker, an officer first appointed before 1985, it comes as if you were in strain or in the 80s and all those who were there before. So you should have been receiving that. But anybody after that, Mr. Speaker, the Disqualification Act say no pension. So we join in legitimately at no pension. And this is what this administration has taken up. We've taken it up, Mr. Speaker, not from a position that you must do it, but from a position that we see it is the right thing to do. And so many people of the opinion that you have to do it because of the Constitution, I think they must be made aware that it is because of the empathy and because of the good nature of this new National Party administration that we see people giving service. And so you should get a pension. That's where it is, Mr. Speaker. And I think the unions have a responsibility to make this known to their members, and we have a responsibility to make this known to the public in Grenada. So it is not as if, well, I let you up. We're asking them to come to an agreement that the fiscal space would allow. And it's not a matter, you must give me this because the Constitution says so. No, let us work together for the benefit of the people and the public officers who do not have a pension. Those are entitled to it. We are now making provision, I think it's 56 of them, Mr. Speaker. And all the various acts, you know, you have the pension acts for the police, you have the pension acts for X category of public service, all of those. The School Teachers Act, you amend the date to the 22nd of February, Mr. Speaker. You have the Police Pension Act, you amend it similarly, Mr. Speaker. You have the Pension Prison Officers Act, because all of that went on the 4th. So you have to amend it now to the 22nd, legitimately doing that, following the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. And you have the Pension Act, Chapter 232, which may be the General Public Service Act, Mr. Speaker. So that's why we put the 5 together and simply change the date in one act. No, and only now, can the government legitimately pay the amount of monies that we pronounce that we'd have paid, because we've now changed the act to do that. Parliament has now given the okay to so do, Mr. Speaker. And so I recommend this bill for its second reading, keeping in mind that we have expounded throughout the country why and the benefits on those persons. Some of them, between 83 to 85, they are sick, they need help, etc. So we found the fiscal space, as we found in many other cases, for the seed people, etc. And now we have announced that we will be paying about $7 million, Mr. Speaker, close to $4 million immediately in gratuities, and another 400 and something thousand, 744,000 in delayed pension that they should have gotten and they did not receive. Mr. Speaker, it is right and just, speaking through you, Mr. Speaker, to my brother Joe, he understands the response. It is right and just to so do. And you too, Mr. Speaker, I do not dare challenge the Speaker or say anything with respect to the Speaker, but know you're well aware of what I'm speaking about, that this bill should go through with its second reading. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Leader of Government Business. Honorable.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, this bill today is very historic because it's coming 35 years after. You know how many governments we had from then? All governments tried to touch it because of the cost. But this government is looking at equity and justice for workers, and that is why we touch it. We are saying it's unfair to the workers, and let us address it. And we are not unspoken about it. We move to amend it, and it's coming at a high cost. Because all along, we went around with 4th of April, 83, as the date, the cutoff time. Then we are advised legally that it has to go up to February 1985. So, for the people who would have retired, between that time, got nothing, you know, after 83, 4th of April 83, to the 21st of February, 22nd of February 85, went home and got absolutely nothing. Because we are going along with the fact that after, if you came after the 4th of April 83, you have nothing to get except the NS, so they introduced. Now, you see this gazetted in 85, you have to pay retroactive pension, you know, Mr. Speaker. Some people in for a lot of money, you know. Some workers, because you have to pay it, because if I retired, if I came within that period of time and left shortly after, making the time, then you have to pay me from the time my pension was due. All the retroactive payment. And then you have to give me the gratuity if I qualify and entitled to it. Because to get gratuity and pension, you have to be working in a pensionable post. So not everybody within that time that will qualify. You have different remuneration packages, but not everyone, because some people is under the impression that everybody within that period of time is qualified. No. The Pension Act says who are entitled to it. But for all those who are entitled to it, you see, 56 people so far that were able, so far, because there is a pension secretariat looking at those who qualify. So imagine 56 people and it costs 7 million. So you know what, that alone give you an idea. Because somebody will say, well, this 7 million covering everybody. That was there because they can't believe that we saying 56 people, but they were saying 7 million. That is because of the retroactive payment you have to make. And so there are windfall for people before Carnival. I was telling to the leader of government business, well, you must pass the law here to give you the authority to pay. So I was saying to you, better you pay this money after Carnival, you know. But he said, no, like too much money, they can't spend that for Carnival. Too much. Mr. Speaker, it's a great day for the union, a big achievement for workers in this country. Big, big achievement for workers. And it's a bold decision of this government. I'm sure after today, all the working class in Grenada, all working people should be praising the new National Party government for taking this bold decision and getting the money. The economy is in a state now where you have the fiscal space to pay the money. If the new National Party didn't come and introduce the structural adjustment program, reduce the debt to GDP ratio, experience growth of 5%, have a primary surplus, where you get the money from? And that's why all government will back it up, because they were wondering, where would you get that money from? So going forward, Mr. Speaker, after 85, a new formula is being discussed. Okay, you can't go back to what the non-contributory plan, that will cause the state, not the NIP government, the state, Mr. Speaker. So now we talk about the government has to pay the money, the state. If we, as the NIP, go and sign any agreement for post-85, that are going to cost the state billions of dollars, where we go, who the state paying it? Is the state, the expenditure is of the state. And so, we have to be responsible people and ensure that whatever formula is agreed to post-85 is one that is sustainable financially. And if pre-85 is not sustainable, because you have a non-contributory plan, and when you leave after 26 years and 8 months, you get a lump sum, full gratuity and a pension, reduced pension, and then after 12 and a half years, you go to full pension, because that's the current scenario. So the formula that will apply for these people and the formula apply for everybody before the 4th of April 83. It's just that you extend the time now to 22nd of February 85. So the same formula, right, that will apply. But that new formula will have to be negotiated and agreed upon by the union and costed. The cost it, you know, Mr. Speaker. So I said the 56 costing 7 million. How much 5,000 will cost? How much 5,000 will cost? You have to cost it. And I said the state, you can't pull the state. When me and Alvin gone, and other people have to come in, and they have to still find the money. So while we move forward, and today, a lot of people will be smiling at the fact that we have come here, addressed the law, passed it. I start paying, already Ministry of Finance, they tried to pay in the month. That's what they say. I don't know when the Senate meeting, because you have to go to the Senate, and the Senate has to pass for it to become law and go to get assented, and then publish in the Gazette. You see how he put on the publication in the Gazette is? This amendment has to be published in the Gazette, you know, Mr. Speaker. So there will be some holiday in August. So maybe I publish after August. And it must be published before the monies pay. Because where you get the authority to pay? This is the law now that giving you the authority to pay now. So you have to be gazetted. And then you pay. I know the Clerk of Parliament is very happy about that. There are active trade unionists fighting. The only people in this country, you don't get nothing for members of Parliament, you know. Nothing for members of Parliament. No increase in 33 years. Members of Parliament don't get increase. No, 23 years, 1995. Which other group of workers are working 23 years and didn't get a single increase? Only members of Parliament. So everybody's salary passing. But when the Secretary passed, it wasn't like that. But when they have salary negotiations for the members of the bargaining unit, we are not part of the bargaining unit. So we don't benefit. Every time increase, every 3 years, you know. So every 23 years, we the 24th year. So that is 8 times they got increase. And they get average at 10%. So we can't get less than 80% increase if we have to get increase to keep up to date. That's what you work on to. But a commission has been set up, a committee, to review it. And I hope it will be done soon. And as politicians, we could be properly remunerated for our services, just like we're fighting for workers. The Clerk of Parliament fighting for workers, but not for parliamentarians. You know. Nobody looking for parliamentarians. But we have to look out for ourselves. So while I'm happy, I'm glad I see this money paid, I want to see the day when we'll come here and see members of Parliament. That's the increase. Then you get it retroactive, not far back, not so far back, but retroactive to the last swearing in, last time. That was from the new term then, the new term. We don't go back for the last 5 years. But I don't think the leader of government business will agree, but we have to do things. So I'm very, very happy today for this amendment, and I commend it fully, Mr. Speaker. I give my full support.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as Minister of Labor, I want to commend the government for this. I think there are many, as my friend, Member for St. David said, there are many workers outside there who are quite happy with the fact that the LNP government has found it fitting after all these years, as my friend Mr. Joseph said, to correct what has turned out to be an unintended consequence of an action in 1983. Because, you know, Mr. Speaker, when we speak of injustice, I just want to put something in context. That when the bill was passed in 1983, it was not the intention to simply disqualify. Remember, it was done in the context of the NIS. So when the NIS came in, this disqualification bill was passed so that everyone in the country was going to get a pension. So I just want to say that the intention of the 1983 Act was not to create an injustice. As we say, sometimes there's collateral damage or unintended consequences to a good intentioned act. So I just wanted to place it in historical context so that while it turned out to be an injustice, it was not the intention. And I say that, Mr. Speaker, because I know that there are persons outside there who were part of the passage of this bill, and maybe people inside here. My good friend was a senior government official at the time, my good friend Minister Joseph, and my good friend the former finance minister, member for St. Patrick, and they all understand. I just wanted to make that point of the intended purpose. So, but I believe today I stand here as Minister of Labor. I am extremely happy. I know that the trade unions, and I want to say this, that I received a very warm reception in the last May Day activity, and I hope when we get this passed through and everything is sorted out with the negotiations, I urge both sides, government and union, to compromise, to find a way to allow the success of the negotiations. I hope that by next May 2019, I will be able to stand before the workers and say proudly that my government, our government, the people's government has done everything to correct the unintended consequences of an act in 1983. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you kindly. Honorable Representative for St. Mark. I did see your light.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As I know, I had put on my light to indicate I wanted to speak, but so much has been said. I don't know how much there is left to be said. However, I want to associate myself with the sentiments of appreciation for the passing of this bill. The presenter, the member for St. George's Southeast, he did allude to an expression, right and just, and I wondered if he thought that that was limited to a very few in this honorable house. Many of us, I just want to say that many of us are very familiar with the right and just expression. But it is indeed right and just, Mr. Speaker, that a wrong that would have occurred, albeit many years ago, is righted today. And also it speaks to the hallmark of the new National Party government. And very importantly, the Minister for Finance. He's caring about people, he's caring about righting wrongs for people. And he always has that expression about improving the quality of life. And while having more money may not be synonymous with improvement of quality of life, but it does go a very long way to improving quality of life. And I believe, albeit for 56 people, it's a great start. And we have seen the fiscal space allow for these 56 people to get some monies that were well deserving. We have seen it extend to the persons who get the welfare assistance or the poor relief, $100 per household, amounting to in excess of $1 million. And you know, it gives me hope, Mr. Speaker, that that fiscal space will extend to us on this side. When I heard the member for St. David speak to it, you know, I smiled because it's one of the things I wanted to say. I always remember that a preacher said something that we hear all the time when we're on a plane, when they're giving you the instruction before takeoff, and they say that, you know, the oxygen mask, if there's need for it and it falls, put yours on first and take care of anybody else there, because you might faint.
Yes.
If you try fixing other people, and you might faint before you get it to yours. And it is so right and just that we start thinking along these lines. And while, I mean, we're not overly anxious, but I think it is time that we start speaking on behalf, because the point is nobody else will. We have to be clear on that. No, if we do not, nobody else will. So I am happy for all those who have gotten. I expect more to be done, maybe with negotiations, not same as what is being done for 83 to 85, but maybe a little something, because, you know, each one of us in our constituency meet people who have fallen prey to that era. And we also see what is happening to them. And the member for St. George's Southeast alluded to some things. People fall ill in the latter part of their life. And frankly, they cannot take care of themselves. And government, through its normal means, cannot extend the kind of care that they need, because it might be exceptional care. And that money would make a difference. But I also want to point out that I heard the Minister for Finance and the member for St. George Northwest say that those who would have passed on, that the children and the grandchildren would benefit. I like that. Somebody should benefit in one way or another, and I want to add my firm support to the bill, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you kindly, Honorable Representative for St. Mark. Honorable Representative for St. George Northeast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I had no intention of speaking on this bill today, but it seems like I am a little bit emboldened by the member for St. David and the members for St. Mark. But, Mr. Speaker, I know after this bill is passed, I will get a few phone calls. And phone calls because people wanted or wants to be treated fairly. I had a few phone calls before, and I know there is one gentleman who worked within the government ministries from 1956 right up until 1983. He was in the Ministry of Works, he was in the port and many of the ministries. And he worked this long for government. Then he was jailed for some maybe 28 years. He's out of prison now, and he has been going to many members asking that he get something. And up to this point, he has not gotten anything. And I know he said to me before he submitted papers to the former Attorney General that he worked within government for all this time before he was put in prison, and then thereafter. He's old now, almost disabled, and I know when this is passed here, he will call me. Mr. Speaker, I support our government fully in terms of moving to satisfy some of what is called maybe injustice in our country to our people, and a lot of things should be corrected and will be corrected. And I heard the member for St. David spoke to the remuneration package of MPs and ministers. And I remember when I first came into Parliament in 1995, the compensation that members and MP got is the same that they're getting today. And everybody else surpassed, and they're still there. But, Mr. Speaker, if I speak on this, I might be condemned. But if I remain silent, then I'm dead. I'm not yet dead. Mr. Speaker, I believe I will do something in protest. In protest of what MPs and ministers are getting in this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, I have received my remuneration package for May thus far. And when I look at it, I say, well, probably if I protest, then I will keep it alive. But if I do not do anything, then it will be maybe just swept under the rug. Now, I remember making a statement that a lot of Grenada was shocked when I said MPs without portfolios are getting $1,200 a month, which is thus so. Mr. Speaker, I have here the stub, and it says here $1,224.96. Telephone allowance, $57. I mean, which telephone today? And then it says NIS deduction, $49. And another deduction, $61.24. And then the net pay, is $1,171.72. Mr. Speaker, I have written a check to the government of Grenada, which I will give to the Clerk of Parliament for the amount of $1,171.72. And it's an act of protest that will keep that alive in our minds and in our eyes. And as they come, Mr. Speaker, every time it comes, I will give it to the Clerk of Parliament. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Representative, for St. George Northeast. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many members have made valuable contribution, Mr. Speaker, to this amendment, signifying its importance, Mr. Speaker. I simply want to remind us, Mr. Speaker, for the post-85, we have dealt with the 83 to 85. For the post-85, the report from the FROC, Fiscal Responsibility Oversight Committee, submitted to this Honorable House, points out, Mr. Speaker, their concern and for the government to report on the cost of NHI that we're talking about, because it is their duty to see that we keep the rules. And primarily, Mr. Speaker, the cost of the post-85 pension agreement. This, Mr. Speaker, is of critical importance. Preliminary estimates had it at over $1 billion for the many workers who joined after 85 and at the sort of levels that the proposals that came from the union. In fact, it was higher. And somewhere it looks as if we may get a settlement that might make the union happen. 1 billion plus, Mr. Speaker. That's a significant sum. As the member for St. David said, we have to make sure that this thing is sustainable. We could only pay those persons from 83 to 85 because we took the measures that we took from 14 to 17. Structural adjustment program, albeit homegrown. Otherwise, you could never have done that, Mr. Speaker. So we must ensure that we do not return into a situation, even though we want to do it, it cannot be done. That's where the rules provide for the fiscal space. So we must be there for us to do it, Mr. Speaker. I make this point because when those between 83 to 85 get theirs, it will put a pressure on the post-85 arrangement. But once we agree that we'll do it sustainably, not to hurt the economy, so that we can grow from strength to strength. We must never forget that the Constitution says is what you are getting then. So if we go for something now that is sustainable, then there's nothing stopping in the next 10 years or something for increasing that bit, is what you get in there. But you don't want to increase and then go down. Because if you walk along the line that we will continue to be disciplined right through, whenever the government of the day, 20 or 30 years from now, see that we're going to get into trouble, they're going to pass not a disqualification act now, but they may call it a reduction act. Because if they don't want to pass it, Mr. Speaker, 50 years from hence, they'll be in a worse position. So we must be responsible throughout. In case, Mr. Speaker, and if the FROC asks for it, then we're supposed to be able to do some analysis and give to them. That figure will be dependent on the arrangement that we have with the unions. And I want to echo the sentiments that the unions have worked with us. The Minister of Labour has indicated that they will continue to do so at this very moment, and we must continue to engage them, Mr. Speaker. It is critical for Grenada to go forward. Mr. Speaker, I therefore recommend this bill for its second reading.
Honourable members, the question is that the bill Amendment to Pension Acts Bill 2018 be read a second time. Those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Amendments to Pensions Acts Bill number 2018.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause.
Honourable members, the question is that this Honourable House resolves itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. Those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable members, this House is now in committee.
Clause 2, Amendment of Pensions Act.
Honourable members, the question is that Clause 2 forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 3, Amendment of Pensions Prison Officers Act.
Honourable members, the question is that Clause 3, Amendment of Pensions Prison Officers Act, forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 4, Amendment of Pensions School Teachers Act.
Honourable members, the question is that Clause 4, Amendment of Pensions School Teachers Act, forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 5, Amendment of the Police Pensions Act.
Honourable members, the question is that Clause 5, Amendment of the Police Pensions Act, forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 1, short title.
Honourable members, the Clause 1, short title, forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I beg to move that the House resumes and the Chairman of the Committee reports progress on the bill.
Honourable members, the question is that the Honourable House resumes and the Chairman of the Committee reports progress on the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable members, this House resumes. Honourable members, I must report that this Honourable House, I must report that I was report that the bill was considered by a committee of the whole House and passed without amendment. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the Chairman's report be adopted.
Honourable members, the question is that the Chairman's report be adopted. Those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the third reading of the bill.
Honourable members, the question proposed is that the bill be read a third time. Honourable members, the question is that the bill be read a third time and passed. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Amendments to Pensions Acts 2018.
Item 16, request for leave to move the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the adjournment of this Honorable House. Sign it, aye.
So we had passed some very important bills here today. The environmental bill is of critical importance. The bill to make sure that money is available to continue the work of government, critical importance. The pension bill, very, very, very important, because I have been associated somehow with the pension restoration and amendment. And I know that every now and again I get a call, Mr. Pierre, I hear you are there. Make sure we get our money. And all I keep saying, don't worry, man. That's a foregone conclusion. Once you started to work before 85. I was clearing myself all the time because I got the legal opinion from the Attorney General, Sir Lawrence Joseph. And I can bank on him. So I say, hey, don't worry. You're covered for 1985. Once you're below 1985, after that, we'll work on you. So I want to thank you, members, for your patience today and for making sure that we got through all the things that we set out to do today. I pray that sometime not too long from now, we would have a review of politician salary. I pray that. And so I want to ask the members of the Committee of Privileges. I know you're tired now and I won't ask you to stay. But we are going to communicate with you via the internet. Please respond. The Committee of Privileges. And if you can't remember who you are, the Honorable Clarice Modest Cohen, Parliamentary Representative for St. Mark, Honorable Oliver Joseph, Parliamentary Representative for St. David, Honorable Yolan Bin Hosford, Parliamentary Representative for St. Andrews Southeast, and Honorable Anthony Boson, Parliamentary Representative for St. Patrick West. Two things. One of the things we have to look at is in urgent matters relating to the FROC, and then we can talk of other matters, privilege matters. There is a committee to deal with certain things, even though we have to make a lot of noise to get it done, but we can meet. Honorable members, I saw somebody on my left indicated. Nobody? Nobody? You're anxious to go home. Honorable Representative for St. George Southeast?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, to speak on the very important point of the FROC and your committee, Mr. Speaker, privileges, they must meet. Also, the FROC reported that the Standing Orders Committee will have to meet according to the rules. We should meet with them to analyze the report. And the Standing Committee on Finance, the entire grouping of us must meet to conduct that report. We did not do that last year. So we came in for some blows, Mr. Speaker, correctly so. I just want to remind that you have quite correctly taken up the Privileges Committee. I just want to remember those Standing Orders Committee, we have to meet as well. And the Committee on Finance, although it's under the Prime Minister, but to meet with the FROC, they're requiring that we do that. Their report goes far and wide, and we have already been questioned. Did the Standing Committee meet and look at this? Is it true? Do we agree with it, and what we will do? Mr. Speaker, so I simply wanted to make this known to the members.
So we would communicate with you initially via the internet, and we hope that we'll be able to do that by tomorrow. So please respond, because there are some things that we need to do urgently, and after that we will plan a more organized meeting. Honorable members, the question is that this Honorable House stands adjourned, sine die. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. This Honorable House now stands adjourned, sine die.